50 mercenaries came to claim one woman. But first, they had to break the will of a weary, unbroken rancher. He saved her by the river, never knowing he was rescuing the last of a bloodline, hunted for a bounty soaked in gold. They faced siege, escape, a bloody standoff, and a fiery reckoning in a burning mission. They were strangers, but became a family, forged in truth and ash. And it all began with Royce Rawlins lived alone, 3 miles east of Deadwood Ridge, in a shack no one visited unless they were lost or dying. Folks in town said he'd gone soft in the head since the war, that his quietness hid something broken. Maybe it did, but it also kept trouble off his land. Until that day. It was near dusk when he spotted her, barefoot, stumbling along the riverbed with the slow, desperate gait of someone fighting to stay upright. Her long, black hair clung to her face, soaked with sweat and blood. Her dress, once vibrant, was torn at the seams. A band of iron still clung to her ankle, clinking faintly against the stones. Royce didn't hesitate. She collapsed before he reached her. He caught her just before her head struck the rocks. She couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, yet her skin burned like fire. Fever high, body trembling. Her eyes fluttered open for a breathless second. Dark haunted things, and she whispered something in Apache. Then she went still. Royce carried her the mile back to his shack. Inside, he laid her gently on his cot and tore away the binding around her midsection. Bruises, old and new, marred her ribs. Someone had kept her chained for a long time. The manacles at her ankle and wrist weren't military issue. These were slave irons. She was maybe 25, no older. But her body told stories that stretched further than years. He cleaned her wounds, cooled her fever, and fed her broth spoon by spoon until dawn cracked the sky. She hadn't spoken again. Not a word in English or Apache, but when her hand clutched his before drifting back into sleep, he knew. Someone would come looking for her, and they wouldn't be kind. By mid-morning, she was still asleep. Royce sat by the fire, sharpening his old Bowie knife, eyes flicking now and then toward the cot. He hadn't even asked her name. She hadn't offered it, and he wasn't one to pry. The irons on her ankle. He hadn't cut them off yet. Something told him it wasn't time. Some scars needed careful hands, not quick fixes. That's when the sound came. Not a knock. More like the creak of a bootstep outside. Then, silence. Royce rose slow, hand finding the scattergun by the hearth. 1 breath. 2. Then the second bootstep. He moved to the door and flung it open. No one was there. Not exactly. 50 yards out, just where the juniper thins, stood a riderless horse, gray, dust-caked, breathing heavy, and beside it, a man, dressed in black from hat to spur, with the build of a hired gun, and the stillness of a man used to taking life for coin. Royce raised the scattergun just enough. "Friend, you're about 3 miles past welcome," he called. The man didn't smile, didn't blink, just said, "She's here, ain't she?" Royce didn't answer. The man tipped his hat. "Name's Flint. Got 50 more behind me, camped near the old mining ridge. Boss says the girl's property. Says she escaped from his train 2 nights back." That word, property, tore something inside Royce. "You come to take her back?" he asked. Flint's eyes were like coal and ash. "Didn't come to ask permission." Royce stepped out, gun steady. "Then you brought 50 men to die." And Flint, cool as creek water, gave a half smile and said, "We'll see come nightfall." Then he turned, mounted up, and rode off. Back inside, Royce found her sitting up, pale but alert. Her voice was a rasp. "They're coming?" He nodded. Her jaw clenched, and through the fear he saw something else. Not a victim, a fighter. "I'm called Kiona," she said softly. Her voice was worn from disuse, but her eyes had fire in them now. Royce handed her the tin cup, water with a bit of willow bark, and she drank slowly. Her hands trembled, but not from weakness, from rage. "They bought me at 9, she said without looking up, "kept me shackled near Tucson. First for labor, then for worse." Royce said nothing. What could he say to that? She looked at him finally. "Why'd you help me?" He didn't answer right away. Just tossed another log on the fire, watching the embers crackle. "Because a man who watches suffering and does nothing," he said, "ain't much of a man at all." She gave the smallest nod. That seemed to be enough. The rest of the morning passed in silence. Kiona slept again, curled beneath the bear hide, while Royce stood watch on the porch, scattergun laid across his lap. The wind had shifted. Now it blew west, carrying the scent of men, horses, and oil. He counted time in shadows. By midday he spotted movement along the ridge. Not one or two. Too many to count with the naked eye. Flint wasn't bluffing. They were coming. They came at sunset, 50 riders strong, just like Flint promised. Royce stood at the edge of his porch, rifle across his shoulder, eyes narrowed. Dust swirled behind the riders as they formed a crescent at the far end of the valley. They didn't charge. They didn't shout. They just waited. At the front, Flint dismounted. He was clean, polished, every bit the professional killer. Behind him stood others. Some ex-cavalry, some bounty men, all armed to the teeth. At their center rode a man in a white hat, tall and cruel-looking, with a gold chain dangling from his vest. "Mr. Bart," Kiona whispered from the doorway. Her hands gripped the frame so tight her knuckles went white. "He's the one who bought me." Royce looked at her. "You sure?" Her voice dropped low. "He carved his name into my shoulder with a silver fork." Royce didn't ask to see the scar. He didn't need to. Instead, he stepped off the porch and walked 10 paces into the dust. "Only one of us leaves standing if you don't turn around," he called out. Bart chuckled from his saddle. "That girl's mine by contract and coin. You think one old rancher's gonna stop what I paid for?" Royce said nothing, just chambered around with a sharp click-clack that echoed through the valley. Flint stepped forward. "Last chance, old man." Royce looked back at the shack, saw Kiona standing tall now, no longer hiding. "She ain't yours," he said, "and I ain't alone." "You ain't alone?" Flint echoed with a smirk. "Sure, don't see anyone standing with you." Royce didn't answer. He walked back to the porch, slow and deliberate, as if the whole world weren't watching. Inside, Kiona had already pulled the irons off her ankle. Her hands shook slightly from the pain of the healing burns underneath. But she was standing, back straight. "You got guns hidden?" she asked. Royce shook his head. "Nope." "Then what did you mean?" He looked at her. "I meant I got truth on my side. And the old code." Kiona frowned. "Old code?" He grabbed a rope from the corner, started tying knots without thinking. Back before all this land got bought and carved up, before greedy men like Bart thought they could buy people like cattle, there was a code men followed. You helped the wounded. You protected the wronged. You fought for the ones who couldn't fight for themselves. He glanced toward the window. "There's still men out there who believe in it. And you think they'll come?" she asked. "I think they've already seen the smoke." Kiona stepped closer. "And if they don't?" Royce handed her a rifle, freshly oiled and loaded. "Then we hold this place like it's sacred ground. 'Cause to me it is." Outside, the wind carried the sound of horses circling and faint laughter from Bart's men. But inside that shack, something stronger than fear had taken root. Resolve. The sun dipped below the ridgeline, bathing the land in a red glow like old blood on sandstone. Royce stood watch at the front door, rifle resting on the window frame. Kiona moved like she'd been born to this, light-footed, scanning the brush, checking the few traps he'd set out earlier. Pain slowed her, but not once did she ask to stop. Then, near twilight, a sound carried on the wind. Distant hoofbeats, but not from the ridge. From the west! Royce froze, listening. He counted 3, maybe 4 horses riding hard, closing fast. Bart's men began to stir, weapons raised, horses uneasy. They'd heard it too. Minutes later, a rider crested the hill behind Royce's ranch. Old buckskin coat, red beard down to his chest, a Winchester strapped across his back. "Red Brant," Royce muttered. "Haven't seen that devil in 10 years. Right behind Brant came a wiry old man with 2 bandoliers across his chest, Joseph Hank Pike, and a Mexican rider in priest robes carrying a Henry rifle. Royce stepped out as the trio rode down. "Didn't think you'd come." Brant dismounted with a grunt. "Saw the smoke, knew you wouldn't light that fire unless it was real," Hank spat. "You always were a magnet for the worst kind of trouble." The priest nodded at Kiona. "She the reason?" Royce nodded once. "She's the reason." From across the valley, Flint's voice rang out. "You think 3 more ghosts gonna stop us?" Brant grinned, rolling his neck. "Ain't ghosts you should fear. It's men." With nothing left to lose, Royce raised his rifle. "Then, let's remind him." From his saddle, Bart leaned forward, eyes scanning the newcomers through a brass spyglass. He chuckled low, shaking his head. "Rollins is called in the relics," he muttered. "Thought they'd all died off or drank themselves stupid." Flint didn't look amused. "That red-bearded one's Brant. Shot 5 deputies outside El Paso and walked away with a smile." "Means he's predictable," Bart said. "Men like that always want to go out in a blaze." "And the woman?" Bart lowered the glass. "The girl's not your concern. She's mine. She's worth more alive than dead. But if I have to take her broken, I will." Flint's jaw clenched. "You want me to ride in first?" Bart shook his head. "Not yet. Let 'em stew. When the moon's up, send 2 men around back. Smoke 'em out. That shack won't hold long." As Flint turned to bark orders, Bart lit a cigar with a gold matchstick and muttered, "Fools always think they're righteous, until the bullets start flying." Back at the cabin, Royce laid out ammo across the table. Kiona sat polishing the rifle he'd given her, her hands steady now. "You're not afraid?" he asked. "I've lived with fear," she said, without looking up. "Now I live with rage." Royce looked toward the window. "They'll try something soon. Let them come." She rose slowly, wincing but defiant. "If I die tonight, it won't be in chains." Moonlight painted the prairie in silver. Quiet settled over the land like a loaded question. Inside the cabin, every breath seemed too loud. Royce sat by the window, eyes fixed on the shadows. Brant and Hank took positions near the root cellar. The priest, Father Padre, muttered prayers with his rifle balanced across his knees. Then, snap! A twig, not far from the rear wall. Royce held up 2 fingers. Brant nodded and vanished into the dark like he'd never aged a day. Kiona crouched near the fireplace, gun trained on the door. Her breathing had gone slow, deliberate. Another sound, rustling. Then a shadow broke from the tree line. 2 men creeping low, one with a lasso, the other holding a sawed-off shotgun. They weren't here to kill. They were here to take her back. But they hadn't counted on Hank Pike. A shot rang out, sharp and surgical. The first man dropped like a stone. The second turned just in time for Brant's boot to crash into his jaw, sending him spinning backward into the dirt. Royce watched it all unfold without blinking. "2 down," he whispered. Kiona didn't smile. "That won't stop them." "No," Royce said, "but now they know we ain't sleeping." In the distance, Bart's cigar flared bright. Then he stood up in his stirrups and shouted, "Enough playing! Burn 'em out!" And just like that, hell came riding. The hired guns came like wolves, fast, howling, reckless. 4 riders broke off from Bart's main line, galloping wide around the cabin with torches lit. One hurled his flame at the roof, but missed, striking the dry fence post instead. It burst into flame, lighting up the whole yard. Hank fired first, took one rider off his horse clean. The second swerved straight into a trap Royce had set days before, a wire-strung trip that caught his horse mid-stride. Horse and rider tumbled hard. The last 2 circled back, but Brant was waiting. A bullet cracked through the night, and the third man pitched backward with a scream. The fourth pulled away, retreating toward Bart's line, but not before Father Padre sent a bullet straight through his torch hand. The man dropped the flame, yelping, and vanished into the dark. Inside the cabin, smoke from the burning post wafted through the windows. "They're trying to flesh us out," Royce growled. "But they'll need more fire than that." Kiana was at the window, eyes narrowed. "They're spreading out, trying to pick us off from the sides." He nodded. "They know we're few. They're hoping we'll panic." Outside, Flint regrouped the remaining 40-some men, shouting orders. Bart hadn't expected this resistance, and now his patience was cracking. "They've had their warning," he barked. "Next move's final." Inside, Royce loaded another round. "Then we best make our stand count." And from Kiona's mouth came a word Royce hadn't heard her say before. "War." They came again, this time not as scattered riders, but a wall of bodies. Rifles raised, boots pounding the dry dirt like war drums. Inside the cabin, Royce and his ragged crew stood ready. But it was Kiona who moved first. She kicked the door open with sudden fury and stepped onto the porch, rifle braced, eyes blazing like desert lightning. She didn't wait for orders. She didn't ask permission. She fired. One shot, clean and loud. A hired gun dropped to his knees, stunned, before collapsing face first in the dust. The charge faltered. The suddenness of her defiance, the sight of a woman, once chained, standing proud and deadly on a porch they'd meant to burn. It froze them. Royce moved beside her, shotgun booming. Father Padre and Hank opened fire from the cellar edge. Even Brant, half-crouched behind a boulder, sent a bullet through a rider's thigh, sending man and mount tumbling. Chaos erupted. And yet Kiona stood firm, firing again and again, face set like carved obsidian. Flint ducked behind a fallen log, furious. "That ain't no girl they dragged off a train," he spat. "That's a warrior," Bart snarled from his perch. "She's costing me coin by the second." Then he raised his hand, and from behind a wagon near the tree line, a new shape emerged. A Gatling gun. Royce saw it and felt his gut twist. "We've got a minute, maybe two," he said grimly. Kiona turned to him, breathing hard. "Then we make them regret every second." The Gatling gun whirred to life. A sound like rattling chains crossed with thunder split the night air. Bullets tore through the yard, splinters of wood and earth flying like hornets. The porch exploded in shards behind Royce as he tackled Kiona through the cabin door just in time. The front of the cabin lit up with holes. Wall beams shattered, furniture splintered. Royce covered Kiona with his body as rounds thudded into the floor inches from them. "They'll rip this shack apart," Hank shouted from the back. "We gotta move." Brant popped his head up, cursed, and ducked as a round took off his hat. "They ain't playing anymore." Royce looked around. "Root cellar. Everyone." They scrambled down through the hidden trap door under the table, one after the other, as bullets chewed through the roof. In the dark, the five of them crouched close. "They'll be on foot now," Royce whispered, trying to close in, clean up whatever's left. Kiona leaned against the wall, pale but steady. "They want me alive. That's their mistake." "Why?" Hank asked, wiping blood from his cheek. "What makes you worth an army of guns?" Kiona's voice dropped low. "Because I'm not just an escaped slave. I'm the granddaughter of Chief Masca, last of the Rainstone line. And Bart wants to parade me through Arizona as proof he broke our bloodline." Royce met her eyes. "Then we make sure he never gets the chance." Above them, the Gatling fire ceased. Boots began crunching across broken wood. "They're coming," Brant growled. Royce cocked his rifle. "Let 'em." The floorboards creaked above their heads. Boots shifted. Voices whispered. Then a beam of lantern light swept through the ruined cabin. "They're gone," one gunman muttered. "Ain't no bodies." Another voice, sharper. "Spread out. Check the shed." The well, that crumbling barn. Girl's still here somewhere. In the root cellar, Royce drew a quick line in the dirt, pointing toward the rear tunnel he'd dug years ago, back when paranoia was his only company. It led up behind the barn, hidden under tumblebrush. He whispered, "We come up behind 'em. Quiet. Fast." Brant grinned. "'Bout time." Hank clutched his revolver, knuckles white. "I only get one good knee, and it's angry." They moved through the tunnel like ghosts, hearts hammering, breath tight. Kiona led the way, her rifle strapped to her back, a blade in her hand. At the tunnel's end, Royce pushed up the wooden hatch. Moonlight poured in. The barn loomed ahead, the cabin behind. 2 men stood guard by the well, while 3 more crept toward the front of the cabin, weapons raised, peeking through busted walls. Too focused, too confident. They never saw what came next. Royce rose silently and fired once, clean through the back of the nearest man's head. Brant emerged with a roar, laying into the second with his knife. Hank took the one at the well with 2 quick shots, and Kiona was already sprinting toward the cabin. Inside, a man was dragging a blanket, searching for signs of the cellar. He looked up just as she arrived. She didn't give him time to beg. Gunfire crackled across the yard. Sharp, controlled. The ambushers never stood a chance. By the time the smoke settled, 6 more of Bart's men lay motionless in the dirt. Royce leaned against the barn post, reloading with quiet fury. Brant wiped blood off his knife with a snort. "Still got it," he muttered. Then came the sound of a slow clap. From the tree line stepped Flint, rifle slung, mouth curled in something between respect and resignation. "Well, Rollins," he called. "Didn't think you had it in you." Royce didn't answer. Flint stepped forward, one hand raised, not in surrender, but in challenge. "I've seen more men die tonight than in the border war. You got guts. I'll give you that. But you're still standing between me and a $50,000 prize." He unbuckled his gun belt, let it drop to the ground. "No rifles, no backup. Just me and you." One man walks away. Royce eyed him, then turned to Kiona. "He's not after the bounty. He's after pride." Kiona's voice was steel. "Then take it from him." Royce stepped forward, muscles stiff, boots crunching the dry dirt. The others watched in silence. Even Bart from his perch on the ridge didn't move. The 2 men faced each other, just 10 paces apart. The silence was suffocating. Then Flint lunged. Royce met him in one swift motion, fist slamming into Flint's gut, followed by a brutal elbow to the jaw. Flint staggered, swung back, clipped Royce across the temple. They fought like men who'd buried brothers. No mercy, no hesitation. Until finally, Flint fell to his knees, blood at his lip, chest heaving. He looked up, eyes full of defiance. "You're too late," he rasped. "Bart's got insurance." Royce raised his fist again. "What kind?" Flint only smiled. Royce stood over Flint, heart thudding in his chest. "Talk," he growled. But Flint just grinned through the blood on his teeth. "You kill me," he rasped, "and she dies anyway." Royce's fist clenched. "What did you do?" Flint spat blood, then leaned back with a satisfied sigh. "Bart knew you'd fight. Knew the girl might slip past our guns. So he paid a second crew. Mercenaries. Not from around here. Sent him east 2 days ago." Royce's blood turned cold. "Where?" "Santa Piedra Mission," Flint coughed. "Where the Rainstone women hid after the last raid. You think she's the only one?" Behind Royce, Kiona's breath caught. Her voice shook. "No." She turned to Royce, panic flashing behind her defiance. "My aunt. My cousins. They're there. The last of our blood." Brant's jaw dropped. "That snake means to burn both ends of the line." Royce backed away from Flint, mind racing. "We need to move. Now." But Flint laughed again, weaker now. "Won't matter. You can't outride what's already burning." A shot rang out. Flint's head dropped limp. Hank lowered his pistol, eyes cold. He wasn't going to help us anymore. Kiona didn't flinch. She stared into the dark, her hand trembling. He's right, she whispered. We're out of time. Royce looked to the others. Bart's got his eyes here, but his knife's already in their backs. Brant nodded. Then let's go cut off his hand. They left, just before dawn. Royce saddled 2 horses while Brant and Hank scavenged ammo and provisions from the fallen mercenaries. Kiona moved like a woman possessed, silent, focused, her fear replaced with a fierce purpose. They rode hard across the low country, kicking up dust trails that vanished into the rising heat. By mid-morning, smoke curled against the far horizon, thin and black, twisting skyward like a warning. Santa Piedra was burning. Royce pushed his horse faster. Kiona rode ahead, hair snapping behind her like a war banner. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. As they neared the mission, the sound of gunfire reached them, distant, sporadic, desperate. They crested the last hill and saw the chapel, roof half collapsed, fire licking up the timbers. A half-dozen riders milled near the bell tower, shouting orders. 2 women huddled behind the stone altar in the courtyard. One held a rifle. The other clutched a child. Kiona's jaw tightened. That's my cousin. Royce pulled up beside her. Then let's show Bart what family really means. Before she could answer, a shot rang out from below, and the woman behind the altar screamed. Kiona kicked her horse into a gallop without hesitation. Royce followed. They rode straight into fire. Kiona rode like the storm itself. Low in the saddle, rifle up, eyes locked on the burning chapel. The first mercenary turned, startled, and caught a bullet to the chest before he could even shout. Royce wasn't far behind, his shotgun roaring, sending splinters and dust skyward. Brant and Hank took the flank, driving in from the west, pinning down the rest of the crew with precision fire. It was over fast. 3 men lay dead. 2 more ran, dropping rifles in the dust. 1 stayed to fight, and paid for it. Royce dismounted near the altar, heart pounding, smoke thick in his lungs. The woman holding the child stared at him with wide, shocked eyes. You, she whispered, you're the one from the stories. Kiona dropped beside her cousin, wrapping her arms around her as the little boy clung to both of them. I thought they took you, the cousin said. They tried, Kiona whispered. But I found people who still remember how to fight. The bell above them groaned, half its structure engulfed in flame. A chunk of stone crashed down feet from Royce. We need to get them out, he barked. Hank appeared at the archway waving. Back trail's clear. Brant tossed a sack of food down from a looted wagon. Whole place is going up. Let's ride. Royce helped lift the child as Kiona's cousin clambered to her feet. They fled down the chapel steps, smoke trailing them like ghost fingers. But before they could reach the horses, another rifle cracked. Brant spun and dropped, hit clean through the leg. More shots rang out from the bluff above. A new threat. A second crew. The ridge lit up with muzzle flashes, bullets tearing through the mission yard. Brant groaned, dragging himself behind a low stone wall. Blood soaked through his pants, but he still managed to reload. Tell me I get a drink after this, he growled. Royce dropped beside him, returning fire. You get 2. Maybe 3 if we live. Hank shouted from behind the supply cart. We're pinned. Kiona crouched near the horses, shielding her cousin and the boy. The mare reared as a bullet struck near its hoof, but Kiona held tight. Royce, she called, they'll surround us. He knew. They all did. But retreat wasn't an option, not with women and a child in the middle of it. Then Royce spotted it. An old adobe storage house at the edge of the compound. Flat roof, narrow entrance, long rear alley. Move to the storehouse, he yelled. Hank, cover! Hank fired wild and hard, scattering the ridge gunners for just long enough. Royce scooped up Brant, half dragging him toward the side door, while Kiona led the others at a crouch. They made it inside just as bullets peppered the stone. Royce slammed the door. Dust rained from the ceiling. Kiona checked the boy, still breathing. We can't stay here, she whispered. They'll burn this building too. Royce looked up. There, through a gap in the ceiling boards, he saw the bell tower ladder, burnt but standing. And beyond that, open rooftops, leading to the canyon trail west. "We climb." The ladder groaned under Royce's weight, brittle with smoke and heat. Every step sent ash fluttering down like black snow. Above him, Kiona had already hoisted the boy onto her back, climbing with calm, desperate purpose. Her cousin followed close behind, tears streaking through soot on her cheeks. From below, Hank shouted, "They're circling!" Brant, still bleeding, braced his back against the door. "I'll hold him as long as I can." "No," Royce growled, pausing on the ladder. "You're coming too." Brant coughed, laughed once. "You'll owe me a lifetime of drinks." Together, Royce and Hank got him up the ladder, inch by inch. The storehouse shuddered, more shots slamming the walls. The wooden frame above creaked dangerously. Kiona kicked out the trap door above and emerged onto the flat, dusty roof of the chapel's rear wing. Wind whipped at her face. The flames below cast an eerie orange glow across the town's broken skyline. "This way," she called, spotting the narrow run of rooftops that led westward, low shacks, stone walls, and open beams crossing the alley. Royce scrambled up behind her, hoisting Brant over the last ledge. Then came a voice, deep, mocking, cutting through smoke. "Run, little rainstone!" Bart called from below. "But there ain't a rooftop high enough to save you now." Kiona didn't flinch. She turned west. "Then we'll fly," she whispered. And they ran. Across rooftops that cracked under their boots, flames licking at their heels, as bullets chased them toward freedom. They made it to the edge just as dawn painted the cliffs gold. Beyond the rooftops, the land dipped into a narrow canyon, twisting, steep, and half-hidden behind scrub and shale. The trail would be treacherous, but it was their only path west. Kiona slid down first, carrying the boy. Her cousin followed, limping, but determined. Hank helped lower Brant, groaning every inch of the way. Royce turned for one last look. Bart stood atop the mission ruins, silhouetted in smoke and flame, his white hat glowing like a death flag. A dozen mercenaries flanked him, rifles raised. "Can't hide in rocks forever," Bart shouted. Royce didn't respond. He dropped into the canyon and joined the others as they stumbled deeper into shadow. The narrow trail curved sharply, then forked. To the right, a dry wash that led to nowhere. To the left, an old mining tunnel, collapsed years ago, now passable only by foot. Royce chose the tunnel. Inside, the air was cool and damp. Darkness wrapped around them, muffling their breaths. "We can hold them here," he said, "one man at a time, no room for flanking." Kiona nodded, her hand steady on her rifle. "They'll come for me," she whispered. "For the name I carry." Royce placed a hand on her shoulder. "They'll find more than they bargained for." And above them, echoing down through the rock and ash, came Bart's final call. "Run as far as you want, girl. When the dust clears, the rainstone name dies with you." But Royce just chambered around and whispered back, "Then let it be the dust that buries you." The first mercenary came fast, boots scraping stone, rifle raised. Royce dropped him with a single shot. The tunnel echoed like thunder. Behind him, Hank crouched beside Brant, who was barely conscious now. "They'll send more," Hank said grimly. "Won't stop till we're all ghosts." Royce wiped sweat from his brow. "Then we haunt 'em." Outside, Bart paced the canyon entrance. "Bring me the girl," he snarled. "I want her alive." 3 more men charged in. Kiona fired twice, calm, precise. One hit the ground. The second stumbled, screaming. Royce took the third with a gut shot. Bart's frustration boiled over. "Smoke 'em out!" he barked. Mercenaries began piling brush and torches at the entrance, choking the tunnel with black smoke. Royce coughed. "We can't hold if they flush us." Kiona's eyes burned. "Then I end it." Before he could stop her, she grabbed a burning stick and slipped through a side crevice barely wide enough for one. Royce cursed and followed, crawling through stone and flame until he reached the canyon mouth, just in time to see her standing above Bart, high on the ledge. He turned, startled. "Kiona," she cut him off. "You branded my body, but not my soul." And she threw the torch. It landed square in Bart's satchel, packed with black powder and stolen ammo. The explosion rocked the cliffs. Dust and fire swallowed everything. When it cleared, Royce found her kneeling on the rocks, breath ragged, but alive. Bart's body lay twisted in the rubble, his white hat burned to ash. The boy ran to her. Brant raised a fist weakly. Hank let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. Royce crouched beside her. "It's over." Kiona looked toward the rising sun. "No," she whispered. "Now it begins."